Did you know that a camel race in the middle of nowhere may have sparked one of the most devastating wars in the modern history? The conflict between Israel versus Palestine? No, like seriously, this four-legged speedster is partly to blame. But as always, welcome back to our channel, where we turn history into the wildest trip you've ever been on. Literally. Today, you will discover that not all wars are about shooting and bombing. In fact, you will be a little shocked when you discover the 13 bizarre reasons that influenced the war between Israel and Palestine for more than a century. Number 1. Blame the Brits. The Balfour Declaration of 1917. Alright, let's take it back to the early 1900s, when the British Empire was busy collecting countries like they were Pokemon cards. In 1917, the British issued the Balfour Declaration, which basically said to the Jewish people, "Hey yo, man, you know that piece of land called Palestine, yeah? Big man thing, you can have it." But wait, didn't the Arabs already live there? Yep, the British had also promised the Arabs the same land as a reward for their help in World War I. It's like inviting two people to sit on the same chair and then acting surprised when they stop fighting over it. The declaration created a massive confusion and tension, leading to the eventual establishment of Israel in 1948, much to the dismay of the local Arab population. Number 2. The creation of Israel in 1948. Awkward housewarming party. Flash forward to 1948, when the UN decided to solve the problem by splitting Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. Israel declared itself an independent nation, and the Arab countries weren't having it. Think of it like Israel throwing a housewarming party and none of the neighbors were invited, so naturally they tried to crash it. What followed was the first Arab-Israel war, with countries like Egypt, Jordan and Syria ganging up on the newly formed Israel. Spoiler alert, Israel not only survived, but also ended up with even more territory than what the UN had originally allocated. This created an even bigger rift between Israelis and Palestinians, who saw their land being taken over piece by piece. Number 3. The Nakba. Palestine's nightmare. For the Palestinians, 1948 wasn't just a bad year, it was their Nakba, or catastrophe. More than 700,000 Palestinians were displaced, with many fleeing to neighboring countries like Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. While Palestinians lost their homes and were trapped in a limbo for decades, Israelis viewed their land as a historical and religious homeland that they had been promised for years. After the horrors of the Holocaust, the establishment of Israel in 1948 was seen as a necessary refuge for people seeking security and self-determination. The Nakba remains a major point for contention today, as displaced Palestinians and their descendants continue to demand the right to return to their ancestral homes, something Israel refuses to grant because, to them, it's like letting the opposing team invade their home field during the playoffs. So you can see that it's not that simple. Number 4. Six-Day War. Israel gets even bigger. In 1967, Israel and its neighbors went at it again in what's known as the Six-Day War. And yeah, it was really only 6 days long. Israel launched preemptive strikes against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria after tensions in the region reached a boiling point. And guess what? Israel won again. Not only did they win, but they also captured even more territory, including the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. This war cemented Israel's dominance in the region, but it also led to even more Palestinian refugees and set the stage for further conflicts over territory. The captured land remains a major sticking point in peace negotiations, as the Palestinians see it as the heart of their future state. Number 5. Religious significance. It's more than just real estate. Alright, so we've got territorial disputes, but why is this specific strip of land so hotly contested? Well, it's because of Jerusalem. One of the most important cities in the conflict holds religious significance for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. You've got the Western Wall, Judaism, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Christianity, and Al-Aqsa Mosque, Islam, all packed into one small area. It's like 3 people fighting over the last piece of cake, except the cake is holy and it cannot be divided. This makes compromise nearly impossible, and any change in the status of Jerusalem tends to spark massive protests and violence and international outcry. Number 6. The rise of Palestinian nationalism and the PLO. In response to losing their land and being displaced, Palestinians began to organize. Enter the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, founded in 1964 to advocate for Palestinian rights and the creation of an independent state. Think of it like Avengers, but for Palestine. Except instead of fighting Thanos, they were up against Israel and its powerful allies, including the United States. The PLO became the leading voice for Palestinians, although their methods weren't always peaceful. They carried out attacks on Israeli targets, and Israel retaliated in a kind. The cycle of violence was set in motion, and it hasn't really stopped ever since. Number 7. Iran gets involved. The birth of Hezbollah. Meanwhile, in Iran, the 1979 Islamic Revolution led to the rise of Ayatollahs, who were not very fond of Israel. Iran began funding and supporting militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has vowed to fight Israel to the bitter end. Hezbollah is like the annoying neighbor who keeps throwing rocks over the fence and refuses to stop no matter how many times you tell them to relax. For Iran, supporting Palestine means opposing what they perceive as oppression and defending the rights of those they see as fighting a powerful adversary. The ongoing cycle of violence complicates any potential peace process, as these groups have no interest in negotiating an agreement with Israel. Number 8. Lebanon gets dragged in. The Civil War and Israel invasion. In the 1980s, Lebanon was going through its own civil war, a messy conflict that involved various factions including Christians, Muslims, and Palestinians. The PLO had set up a shop in Lebanon, launching attacks on Israel from across the border. Israel, in response, invaded Lebanon in 1982 to push out the PLO and establish a buffer zone. But as we've seen before, wars in the Middle East tend to create more problems than they solve. Israel's invasion led to the rise of Hezbollah and deepened the animosity between Lebanon and Israel. And here we are, decades later, with Hezbollah still launching rockets into Israel from time to time, and Israel keep attacking with airstrike. Number 9. Settlements. Real estate gone wrong. One of the biggest obstacles to peace today is the issue of Israeli settlements in the West Bank. These settlements are essentially Israeli towns built on land that Palestinians claim for their future state. It's like someone setting up a tent in your backyard and refusing to leave, even after you've called the cops. The international community, for the most part, considers these settlements illegal under international laws. But Israel disputes that. The settlements have grown steadily over the years, making it even harder to negotiate a two-state solution that would allow both Israelis and Palestinians to live peacefully in their own countries. Number 10. The Gaza Strip. Blockades, bombs, and battles. And then there is Gaza. This small coastal strip is home to nearly 2 million Palestinians and has been under Israeli blockade since 2007, after Hamas took control of the area. Gaza is like that one neighborhood that's constantly on lockdown because of the gang violence. Except instead of gangs, you've got Israel and Hamas trading rocket fires. The blockade has led to widespread poverty and hardship in Gaza. And every few years, the situation escalates into a full-blown conflict, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Peace talks have repeatedly failed, and Gaza remains one of the most volatile areas in the region. Number 11. Intifadas. The uprising that shook the region. If you've ever played a video game, you know that sometimes things can go from normal difficulty to insane mode pretty quickly. That's kind of what happened with the Intifadas. These were large-scale Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation, with the first one kicking off in 1987 and the second one in 2000. The first Intifada was mainly about civil disobedience, think strikes, boycotts, and demonstrations. But by the time the second Intifada came around, things got way more violent, with suicide bombings, armed attacks, and Israel responding with military force. These upbringings were like a pressure cooker that exploded after decades of tension. Why do they matter though? Because they marked a major turning point in the conflict. The Intifadas shifted public perceptions and international attentions back to the Israeli-Palestinian struggle, while also deepening the divide between the two sides. Today, the legacy of these uprisings still impact negotiations, with each side blaming the other for the violence. Number 12. The role of the United States, the not-so-neutral mediator. If you've ever been to a high school football game, you know the refs are supposed to be neutral. Well, when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the US is more like that referee who's also the quarterbacks that. Since the mid-20th century, the United States has been a key player in the region, supplying Israel with military aid, financial support, and political backing. On one hand, the US has acted as a mediator in peace talks, trying to broker deals between Israel and Palestine. On the other hand, their strong pro-Israel stance has led many Palestinians to see them as biased, which complicates negotiations. The US's involvement has helped Israel become the military powerhouse it is today, but it also added another layer of complexity to the conflict. Palestinians view America's influence as a major obstacle to achieving their goals, while Israel relies heavily on the US's support to maintain its security. Number 13. Cyber warfare and social media. the new battlefield. Welcome to the 21st century, where wars aren't just fought on the ground, they're also waged online. In recent years, the Israel-Palestine conflict has expanded into digital realm, with both sides using social media and cyber warfare to spread their messages and undermine the other. During major escalations in the conflict, platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook light up with hashtags, viral posts, and memes. Yes, even war has memes. Public opinion is swayed through online campaigns, and governments use cyber tactics to target infrastructures, steal data, and disrupt communications. In some ways, the internet has given a voice to the voiceless, allowing Palestinians to share their stories with a global audience. But it's also made things messier, as misinformation spreads like wildfire and people on both sides of the conflict use social media as a new battlefield to attack their enemies. In the digital age, propaganda isn't just dropped from planes. It's tweeted in real time. Number 14. The camel that had nothing to do with the story. Now let's wrap things up with the most unexpected. A camel race may have sparked the Israel-Palestine conflict, believe it or not. Yes, this seemingly innocent event was due to the camel races that took place in Palestine, especially around cities like Jerusalem. But boy, these weren't just local events. They represented cultural pride and a sense of belonging for the Bedouins and Arab residents alike. But things took a turn for the bizarre when a camel race that took place in 1929 began to spark friction over poverty and resources among local tribes. They no longer saw camels as just camels, my friend. The humpbacked animal began to symbolize a larger struggle for land, identity, and cultural significance. This event was literally one of the conflicts that contributed to wider violence, including the Hebron massacre of 1929, where Arab riots against Jewish communities resulted in countless deaths. Well, although a camel race may seem silly, it ended up adding weight to the dispute between Israel and Palestine to this day. Who would have thought that an animal like that would contribute to a fight of this size? So, why are Israel and Palestine still fighting? It's not just one thing. It's a complicated mix of history, religion, politics, and territory, with outside powers like Iran and Lebanon and United States steering the pot. This conflict has roots going back over a century, and every time it seems like peace might be possible, something happens to derail it. The situation remains one of the most intractable conflicts in the world, and while there are occasional glimmers of hope, the path to the peace is still far from clear. What we do know is that as long as the issues of borders, settlements, and the status of Jerusalem remains unsolved, the fighting is likely to continue. But hey, at least now you can impress your friends with your deep understanding of one of the world's most complicated conflicts. Just remember to keep it light. No need to start a war over it.